essay was to justify Nerissa. Glenn, who didn't like skateboarding, basketball, and never read comic books or played video games. After school, most boys hung around at each other's houses wreaking havoc. Instead, every afternoon, Glenn biked to Everglades National Park, his place of refuge and comfort. He would sit on the damp grass and look at the sky. The birds busily collected twigs before disappearing into the thick foliage of the mangrove trees. The birds busily collected twigs before disappearing. The alligators lounged like fat men in a hot tub as they lurked eerily awaiting their prey. Yet the otters played around like little boys, toying with pebbles and flipping into the water. Glenn would laugh. He did love the birds, the lazy, deadly alligators, and the mischievous otters, but he had a single favorite. He spent hours watching the graceful manatees. Every afternoon, he'd walk along the shallow water, right into the no-wake zone, meeting his favorite manatee family. There were three, a large one, who he named Nerissa, and two calves he named Jim and Jessica. The laws prohibited him from touching them, but merely sitting in their presence brought him joy. He knew they felt the same way. He was insecure, but around them he never felt lonely or afraid. Glenn was an artistic and creative boy. He'd sketch, draw, and paint them. He was infatuated with them. Suddenly, everything changed. It was hotter than usual that day. The humidity was dense and thick as blood. He was not ready for the sight that stood before him. His Nerissa washed up into the grass, with a long, deep gash down her belly. She was bleeding profusely, flesh exposed. Glenn knew immediately what had happened. A boat's propeller drove straight through her. Quickly, he called the Wildlife Emergency Hotline number he had memorized from his Boy Scout days. She and her calves were taken to an animal hospital, where they desperately tried to save her. Glenn prayed all night for the well-being of his aquatic friend. At twilight, he learned that the propeller had punctured her heart. She did not make it. The calves were being taken to a facility for rehabilitation and released back into the wild. Glenn was heartbroken and was completely irate. For days he stared up at the paintings of the once free trio. He refused to go to school. If only the boater had paid attention and slowed down for these gentle creatures, Nerissa would still be alive. Suddenly, something surged through him for the first time. Nerissa died because of negligence. All this horrid suffering was because the boaters were not paying attention. They deserved to be protected. There needed to be stricter laws. And so, the next day, Glenn Pluid found himself around the doors of the town hall, followed by a horde of anxious citizens clad in t-shirts that bore his best painting of Nerissa. They waited earnestly and finally pushed him forward. "I'd like to speak to the mayor."